2, 1. Podcast is on. Oh, one more rule, but this one will come into the podcast. We don't post this video. We post something on YouTube, but without our faces.
Fair. Okay. Dude, I like
that. We are too beautiful for the internet.
Dude, they have to pay for premium.
Okay. So welcome to the podcast, Djae, Aroni. Once again, I cannot introduce you because we're meeting for the first time. So I leave it to my dear Aflatun to decide how you introduce yourself, whether he introduces you or you do the introduction by yourself.
I'll do maybe the briefest introduction, then he can maybe tell us a bit more. So I know Djae as actually knew him first from a band called Crystal Axis when I was in campus, I think. Campus or high school.
Yeah.
So punk rock band. I think the lineup, I can't really remember the lineup surely at that time, but there was, I think your brother was playing in that band too.
Yeah,
I think
Booga was on the drums, Neil was on the guitar, Ahmed was doing vocals and I was on the guitar.
Yeah, so I think Ahmed still does vocals.
Yeah, Ahmed is still on the vocals. Neil not anymore because we're in 2 different countries and 2 different continents. So Fox does guitar now, Doug is on bass, and then Dan he's actually on drummer now. Yeah. So that's it's the lax at the moment.
Yeah. So after that, I think that may be significant thing. He's a lawyer by training. I don't know whether he was with the dreadlocks, but he's also gone into action, and I've worked with him as a co-writer for an online magazine that we've had running for some time. So yeah, maybe can take over from there.
Yeah, man. So like you said, I'm a musician, I'm a lawyer, I'm a farmer. Honestly, yeah, jack of all trades, master of none. Like this is like the one time where that phrase actually applies in my situation. But yeah, like you said, a lot of music, the law stuff. So I did, I did study law, trained as a lawyer. However, that's not my calling or my passion or just anything I want to spend my time doing. So I completely moved away from legal practice. So right now I'm working in the nonprofit space. I'm actually working for an organization that's focused within the activism and art space. So the focus is on artists who are basically doing activism, but it also touches on issues of governance, public policy, social accountability. So I feel like I'm really kind of now in a space where I'm really just happy and doing my thing and thriving. Like I wake up on Mondays, I'm like, shit, dude, I'm actually looking forward to going into the office, which has never, ever happened in my life before. I remember like working at the law firms and shit, I'd wake up, dude, I get to the office and the last one I was at, it was like a 13th floor office. I used to stand there before going to the office and look outside the window. I was like, if I jump, do you think the impact will be enough to just take me out? Because the worst thing that could happen is like you just end up like a fucking quadriplegic or whatever. So it's like, yeah, but like now it's the complete opposite. I'm like, dude, I'm excited to go to work tomorrow. I'm looking forward to that shit.
That's the best feeling, eh?
Dude, exactly. I genuinely never ever thought I would feel this way, like about work, about labor, you know? Because me, like when people ask you like what's your dream job, bro, I don't fucking dream about labor. There's nothing that excites me. But this, I'm like, yeah, dude. I'm looking forward to going into more money.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Gives life meaning, no?
Yeah, it actually does.
I'm going to jump into the deep end seriously. Mm-hmm. Yesterday we were having a conversation about Karl Marx, and Marx had a very interesting theory of labor, a concept he developed called alienation, which is, he was coming up in this time when the Industrial Revolution was taking place, and so people were going into these huge hulking buildings with smokestacks belching dark smoke into the cities and are dark and grim, and even children are being sent into these factories and into the mines and all that. It was a very inhuman period for labor, and Marx basically theorized that the capitalist system alienates people from their labor. It's like you're turned into a unidimensional creature that only pumps out products or goods for people you don't know. And, as compared to like the pre-industrial age where people were mostly artisans, somebody would make, if he was making chariots, he would make the whole chariot from beginning to end. He would make the wheels, would make the body, he would make the harness, he would make the whole thing. Now, if you work in a factory that makes cars, maybe your job is just tightening the bolts on the wheels. There's no meaning whatsoever to what you're doing. And I find that very compelling. I don't agree with Marx completely. I'm the last thing from what the modern world would classify as a Marxist. But I saw that. I mean, that era really made labor or work become something so inhuman. Something that you become like a machine yourself. And you see this being parodied by all, like many artists from that era, from Dickens all the way to Charlie Chaplin, who make all these very interesting narrative commentaries on the state of labor at that time. Well, one good thing did come out of that time, which is unions and organization and activism and all that. And I think that even led to the gender equality movement that got women the vote and stuff like. Anyway, maybe even anti-colonialism, all that in a sense came from that era where people could organize mass organizations of mass movements of resistance to the status quo. Anyway, I just felt like, and so when you say something like, I mean, you wake up happy, that you're going to actually do something. It's not just for the bread. It's like fulfillment every single day, and even the frustrations that come in that it's a beautiful thing.
But I feel like it ties into like exactly what you said, which is like at the end of the day, capitalism is the biggest problem. We're in this system where you just have to churn shit out regardless of how you feel, what you're doing. You just have a quota you have to hit, and then at the end of the month there's X amount of cash coming in. So it goes from being, even like with music, for example, it goes from being your passion into like something where you have to produce and make a product because without like the music, without an album, without an EP, you're not getting streams, no one's buying this shit, so you're not going to eat. So it becomes a chore. But only because like you're stuck in the capitalist machine, so you have to just keep fucking grinding and grinding and grinding, and it's horrible, man. It's honestly fucking horrible. Like, capitalism is honestly the worst thing, one of the worst things for facts, for sure.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, really, that there's no other system that's nearly as productive as capitalism, because like all the other alternatives that have been proposed just lead to disaster everywhere. I mean, like,
I'm curious to pick your mind a little bit more about that. Like when you say all the other systems that have been proposed just lead to disaster, like what, for instance?
For example, Marxism, like Marxist communism, it's oh my goodness, like I think caused more suffering even than National Socialism, the Nazi system. More suffering, more pain, more hunger, more deaths. I mean, because of the like the communist system in China, when during the times of Mao, there was a time when 60 million people died of famine. In a country that, interestingly, when they adopted managed capitalism, have not experienced famine since, like for the last 40, 50 years, because they allowed farmers to actually own their property, and to farm, and they built these special economic zones in places like Shenzhen, which are now manufacturing all the equipment that we're using. Like probably the computer I'm using right now came from that area. Yeah. So there's that, and then like systems before that, feudalism, and I don't know what it is that we had in Africa, but
that thing you mentioned. No, the question I have is it really a problem with the theoretical background?
Yes,
like the way it was proposed. or was it because of the way it was implemented? Because previously, if you had a look at what Professor Okoto Gento says about what was it called, tenants of the crown, you found that you had almost like a kind of like a communal system that had some versions of private property, but there wasn't the sort of crisis that is perhaps generated by the idea of owning things in that sort of communist sense, which is what worked for us.
Yeah.
And when you come and implement the sort of, I feel as if capitalism is still worse than what we had traditionally. Yes, it has allowed people to create more wealth, but I mean, at what expense? It wasn't like people were dying of hunger. There was food, still get crises and things like that. But
well, I do think people were. I mean, there's stories there's folktales of periods in which there was famine and hunger, even in Africa. Maybe we might not have exact details of when each of those events took place, but you see it when you read our stories, rather when you hear them told. And the reason I put it like that is, yes, we didn't have that, and assuming that even we didn't have what's the term? I'm not going to put all the benefits at the feet of capitalism. A lot of things have also changed to bring us to the situation we are in, to the extent that it is good. But our ancestors were in the state of nature, man. The Hobbesian state of nature. Life was short, brutish, and I mean, just 2 generations ago, like a woman would lose more than half of her children before they turned 5. People would die in childbirth. There was a lot of chaos. They didn't have access to as many goods as we do now. Of course, this is a double-edged sword. Absolutely. What I'm saying is, like, there's no system that has resulted in a more comfort and more abundance economic system than capitalism. And so even though we do see how it dehumanizes us, like how, especially in its more extreme forms, how it to use the Marxist term, it alienates us from the fruits of our labor. You do something here and now, and you don't even know who benefits from it, because everybody has choices and a million things they could do. There's that. And maybe that's something we need to think about. But like all the ideas that Marx proposed to fix the system, or at least not all the ideas, the major ones, like communitarian ownership of the means of production, the proletariat taking over from the bourgeoisie, the capital, disastrous. That thing only works in a case where people really have a reason to love each other. And there's only one setting like that. It's the family. Father, mother, and their children. The father has decided to come together with this woman, and they've decided to have these babies. And the babies really have no choice. They can't exist without their parents. So it's like they're compelled to share everything. The father works, the mother works, they bring everything they get, and they bring these people up. The moment you introduce a third party into that system, all of a sudden now there's other motivations that are involved, like how much will my child get to this other person? And now you have morality, coming in that is not motivated by biology. And bring third order or fourth order of separate. You even see this in cases where, like, a child is being brought up in a family that is not his immediate family. Always there's tension, because now you have to start thinking of, do I treat this person exactly like my child, or are there carve-outs that I have to make, especially when resources are scarce? Put that at the level of a nation, which is where we're talking of the economy. You can't. And so you end up having the same pathologies of capitalism going into the communist systems. Power gets centralized. A lot of the money goes to one big group of people, and they oppress everybody down here. Except now in this case, these guys down here don't have recourse to their own private property. They don't have the land, so they can't do anything. So at the very least, with the capitalist system, the domestic economy, the family, still has a to some extent, some control over the means of production at the local level. So if the system fails, they can still take care of themselves. In North Korea right now, you cannot get even a cob of maize from a farm that you work on. Anyway, communism assumes that people are perfect, which people are not. That's what I'm saying. So the best is capitalism, which takes advantage of people's imperfection. Maybe we can get a better system. Yeah.
Capitalism is shining. That's why it wins. It pits people against one another. And like it's crabs in a bucket. Like you see someone climbing, you have to put it down and all that. And that's where capitalism excels, and that's why it works as a system, because
it harnesses that.
Exactly. Yeah. It preys on your insecurities, and it manages to harness it in such an efficient way that no one has to compel.
Yeah,
no one has to compel you to be part of the system. Like you just know the system exists, it's there, you're in it, and there's no way out. Like no one's going to wake you up with a gun to your head and tell you, "I cool, now you need to wake up today, go to the factory, work, and make your boss rich." You just know this is a thing I have to do, because if I don't do it, then shit's just gonna get fucked. So
I'll be hungry, and somebody else will come and replace me. But they won't chase me out of this. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, we sidetracked into this quite a bit. We should.
We should definitely circle back to this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, we should have a whole session about theory of labor. And I recommend for you a philosopher called Hannah Arendt, who had a very convoluted, but I enjoyed reading her. What's the name of that book? There's a book where she talks a lot about this, and I find it quite insightful, even though I cannot tell you exactly how right now. It requires digging into my memory too much. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. So where are you joining us from? Nairobi? Or?
I'm just in Nairobi. Yeah, just Nairobi. Live and work in Nairobi. Though I won't lie, I mean, with the current state of the economy, I have genuinely for the past couple of months been contemplating just how can I leave this city? How can I just go somewhere else altogether? So initially I was thinking of going to Shags, where my dad lives, just, setting up, as long as I have like Wi-Fi, internet, and I'd imagine I'm good,
Yeah.
The whole work from home vibe.
Where's that?
But yeah, Nairobi. Kisii.
Uh-huh. That's just a few kilometers from here. Do it.
Then I can be commuting on the weekends, and we can just have these calls in person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, Nairobi is very trash city. I don't recommend it for anyone. Like if you have an option to not be in Nairobi, please don't be here. It's not.
It's become big enough that it's itself also dehumanizing. There's too many people.
Exactly. Yeah. And I kept trying to explain this to friends. Like, so when I did my undergrad, I did it in the UK, and my master's as well.
Mm-hmm.
But my undergrad was in this small town called Kent, which was literally a town. It wasn't a city. It was basically a village. If more than anything, it was just like a village with a town, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So moving from that and then moving to London, like the contrast was insane. Like in Kent, the shop owners, you even know some of the taxi guys, all the bouncers and all this shit. It was that small. In London, completely different. Like it was that big, that impersonal. Everybody's on their own mind. No one gives a fuck about you. And like I remember moving back to Kenya after a couple of years there, and that's the same vibe I got from Nairobi. And I keep telling people about this. Like to me, Nairobi is actually like London on steroids, because of how fucking hectic it is. It's next level shit.
Yeah.
Like cost of living is high. Being in the city is just impersonal as well, because everyone is on their own grind. It's you versus the next person. And like I'd say the only difference between that and London is like in London, for example, you're making a wage where you can kind of navigate through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not exactly a livable wage, but it's a wage, like you're getting cash. Plus there's also systems, like infrastructure is there. So for example, transport is not, it's there, it's available. You can take the bus, you can take the tube, the trains, etc., so on and so forth. Whereas with Nairobi, for instance, there's no infrastructure in place, especially when it comes to transport and that kind of thing. So it's fucked. It's just
every man for himself. Even going from point A to point B, you have to depend on yourself. I've found that it's actually quite convenient
Exactly.
to move around Nairobi on a motorbike.
It
Way more,
is.
yeah, on your own motorbike, not those boda guys. Those guys will kill you.
Yeah.
But they're nice too. They are very nice too.
That's it. It's like on two separate spectrums. Either they'll kill you or they're good. There's no in between.
There's nothing in between.
So every time.
Wow. Okay. So then, how did you end up in music?
I've genuinely always loved music. I think like when I really started getting into it, maybe I was like 12 thereabouts. This is when I started like discovering more alternative music, like punk, rock and roll, that kind of thing. So when I was around 11, 12 was probably my first foray like into the world of punk, metal, and all that shit. And I was just immersed and just blown away. To me, I found it to be extremely expressive. These people I've never met and I have nothing in common with. They're saying things in the songs that I can fucking relate to, and it's hitting like the way nothing has ever hit before. So yeah, as I was listening to it, like Kidogo, I was like, dude, I've always been interested in guitar. Maybe I'll pick it up. So when I was like, around the same time as well, one of my friends had a guitar, so I just started messing around on his. And then I just tunneled after that. All I did for years was just music. I'd go to school, but I was still just thinking about music, or we'd cut class to go play music in the music room. Just listen to songs with one another. So it started that way. Then when I was 14, one of my older sister took me to my first rock show in Nairobi, Battle of the Bands at Resorts, and it just fucking blew my mind. Like it was one thing having like Rick D's weekly top 40, like being able to listen to rock on like Saturday mornings. It was one thing having you and the small rock shows, but like actually seeing this shit in real life and seeing Kenyans, like people who look like me, like these guys they're really doing it, and it's really happening. Like this shit it's real. It's right here in front of my eyes. So immediately after the show, literally go to school the next day, and we started Crystal Access literally the next day after that. So I got my little brother to play drums. Neil was playing guitar. I was playing guitar. So then, pretty much it all just took off after that. I just tunneled. I got into music production, not even because I really wanted to produce music, but I did it out of spite. There was this period in time where everyone and their aunties in Kenya was a DJ. Everybody was into the house and EDM scene and all that shit. And this shit pissed me off a little bit because I'd be like, guys, we have a show this weekend. No one would come for this show. But like, there's this and this techno gig over there. And guys are just losing their minds about it. So one weekend, I was like, dude, this is computer music. This shit ain't real. We play fucking instruments and we write our music. I'm going to go sit down for a weekend and I'm going to make a song and prove to you guys this shit isn't real. Then honestly, once I started like the process, I was like, "Yo, shit, this is fucking dope. I love this. This is guys. I changed my mind. This is real. This is real music. This is legit." And then just stuck to it after that for like all these years. That was pretty much my like segue or my introduction into the world of music and
it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that it's because you first you experienced the music and then experienced it being made by people who looked like you. I guess the question is, did you not experience other art forms that were also made by people like you? And if you did, then why is it that it's the music that caught you and not any of those other art forms?
Yeah.
Sorry, the reason I say this is because I had the same experience, but except for me, it's writing that took me. Because I listened to a lot of music when I was a kid. I watched a lot of movies, so a lot of cartoons, but also read a lot of books. And the one thing that kept coming to me was like, why can't I make also stories like this? Oh, no, it never occurred to me, why should I not make music? Oh. So what is it? Is it that you experienced more music, or is it that maybe there's something mysterious in you that's more inclined, musically inclined?
A bit of both. For instance, like for example, before really venturing into the world of rock, metal, and all these other alternative subgenres, I was really like into the rap and hip hop scene, especially locally. Up until today, Issa is one of my favorite rappers, and I know all his songs back to back, and I can like word for word, verse for verse, go if I was to recite it, I could do it, not a problem. So at some point I was like, writing a little bit as far as rap goes and that kind of thing. But like once I got into rock, I just completely shifted and gravitated. And I think what it was for me is like the subject matter being covered and the way it was being covered. Like, especially at that time, thinking about how I was consuming music or how I was approaching music. When you hear of like Issa, for example, or Nameless or that kind of thing, this song is by Nameless. So you just think about what is he saying, how is he performing it, and all that. The focus is on the rapper himself or whoever the main artist is. Whereas when it came to rock, for me, it just opened up a whole new way of thinking and a way of approaching this and of how to look at it, because there was the vocalist, there's a guitarist, there's a bassist, there's a drummer. Each of them is doing their own thing. Like it's like all these 4 or 5 different components coming together, and it just speaks for itself. And not to say that doesn't exist in like rap or hip hop, but the way it's translated or the way it's used in rock and metal is very different than in hip hop, for example, where sure the beat is there, but your focus is not necessarily on the beat. Sometimes it's just literally just on the artist or the rapper. Whereas for me, with rock and all these genres, it was first and foremost this guitar riffs are insane. The drummer is killing it. Holy shit, the bassist is doing ABC, blah blah blah. So it just opened up the way I was thinking, the way I was approaching music, the way I was consuming it. It really did also change, my general approach and thoughts to life, because a lot of these bands were, especially within the punk scene, were political bands. So there's times I listen to songs or albums where maybe I didn't fully understand what the subject matter was or what they were talking about, and then I would go do a little bit of research afterwards, which now led me to concepts like the idea of anarchism, socialism, even Marxism to an extent. There's all like subjects like and topics these genres sort of touched on. So for me, it's just that the way it broadened my horizons, the way it opened up doors for me, and it got me to look at things very differently. It was like seeing life in Technicolor for the first time. Like everything else was black and white, but then like once this shit was put in front of me, everything started to make a bit more sense. And I was like, holy fuck, life is not just one-dimensional thing. There's all these different ways you can approach it. There's all these different lines of schools of thought you could be subscribing to it. Yeah, so for me, it was just basically that. Like it just opened up those, and it forced me to look inside and think a bit more broadly as well. Like, cool, what do I stand for? This is wrong. That's not whatever. Like you tunnel. You start reading about the artists as well. What did they believe in? What kind of individual were they? And then you sort of get into their politics as well. And you just tunnel, and it opens up so many fucking doors.
Amazing.
Let me ask this question. Yeah, I wanted to get to it a bit later, but I'm seeing the conversation going somewhere there. So I'm sure you're familiar with this thing that is going on right now, like a lot of coups. It's not maybe the first time, but I feel as if there's almost this new anti-neocolonialism wave that is sweeping through, I feel as if, Central and West Africa. The reason I mention that is because your songs, particularly I think from Crystal Axis, because you have a lot of projects, has tackled the issue of colonial, especially the biggest genocide that isn't really in popular media. The rule of King Leopold, and perhaps even what DRC is still going through at the moment, because people have been saying like, oh, DRC after Ali Bongo, watch out, Felix Tshisekedi, things like that. So I don't know where your mind is at right now. Of course, there's the question of people have to also be aware that when military juntas come on board, yes, there's the anti-colonialism fetish, but once they settle into power, they just become the same monsters,
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, so I think what's the statistic? There've now been 8 coups in the last 3 years, I think, in Western Central Africa.
Yeah, there's a country that had 2 in 1 year, Burkina Faso, last year, like 2.
Yeah.
February and then October.
Which is crazy. Like, so we're living in a period of time which is all these things that are happening are completely unprecedented and unheard of.
No. Sorry, I beg to differ there, and I'm sorry that I'm getting hung up on a detail. The generation before us experienced exactly this.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've had a hiatus, more or less, of about 20 to 30 years, and now the whole shit is coming back. And the amazing thing is, almost 60% of all Africans were born after that last period of coups. The 60% of Africans living now, like most of us are under 25. I am not in that group. And this age group of ours is by far the majority. If you include us, I think we break up like 75% of Africa. Yeah. And we are the ones that are now, again, doing this coups. Because, again, you find a lot of young people, especially in West Africa. Yeah.
So and maybe I'd say like it's unprecedented, maybe for like people
us.
out. Yes, for us. Yes. Not like in the entire history of human history. Yeah. Contextually, for us, it's not something we've really seen at this scale.
Once again, I'm so sorry. This is a necessary rudeness. We have less than a minute remaining on this call. I should have said this at the beginning, but usually we just end because we are cheap. Yeah. We're not paid for Zoom Pro.
We are cheap like that.
Yeah. So we end it. You click the same link, and we come back into. It's a forced break. Yeah. Please continue now that we're back.
Yeah. I don't know. It's been interesting to see all these things unfold these last couple of years. For me, the main thing has always been, fine, the military is taking this particular stance and this is what they're saying. And there is a lot of reasons why a lot of these people have been garnering support in terms of other countries, even the local people, which is, of course, we want the incumbent government who has been nonsense out. And these are the people who are sort of taking the charge with that and leading with that. However, for me, on a personal level, I really find it difficult to throw my weight or my support behind any kind of law enforcement apparatus, whether it's the military or the police. These things just shouldn't exist. That's how I feel. So for me, the main thing has been...
Fuck the police, eh?
Fuck the police. All cops are bastards. Every single... But for me, the main takeaway, or rather my main... the thing that's been sort of feeding how I react or how I respond to what's going on is, what is the public saying? What are the people saying? Is this a change they're happy with? Is this a transition where they're fully backing and they support? It's like, if you look in the case of, what was the last one? There's been so many even going on. Gabon. Like this last one, for instance. Yes, like Gabon, for instance. With that one, again, because there's been sort of a bit of a blackout in terms of communicating with people within the country, given the internet shutdown and all this. So there's not been too much coming out, especially that first period, like once the military announced what was going on. But for me, the thing is, like, if the people are throwing the weight behind this and this is something they want, then the people have spoken. And that's the main thing. Like, if it's people power, fine. And this is a transition you're happy with, and this is a transition you want, or you feel like this is part of the transitional process, as you guys figure it out, fair enough. But I don't know, it's been a really techie one. It's been a weird one. Because again, like I said, I can't throw my weight behind any sort of military junta or anything like that and say, yes, okay, cool, they're doing this, they're taking charge, they're taking power. For me, it has to be a people-led process and a people-led transition. And it remains to be seen what will happen after this. Like, I feel like this is just, like with any coup, this is just like the beginning. Like, this is just one fraction of the entire process, or like of the entirety of how things are going to play out. So I don't know, like on one hand, it's great to see like the West being expelled and like people actively and speaking up and saying, by the way, we're not fucking with the West or anything. So, or any sort of apparatus or individual who is charming with the West, like with Ali Bongo, for example, we know he was a fucking puppet for the French. So that one, yeah, it makes perfect sense. And that also makes sense why people, especially the Gabonese people, are like, yes, this dude has to go. And we support this. Yeah, so on a basic level, yeah, I'm with it. I'm like, yeah, let them, it's about time. Africa rising. Yo, let's do this thing. But again,
I am not with it, not in the list. I am not fond of these guys because in many, like especially this generation, I cannot speak for the last period of coups, even though we have evidence of them also being disastrous in most cases, and many of them also were driven by the West. Those guys had Western support. Many of them, people like Museveni and from all the way from Mobutu. Many coups were, to what's the name of that fellow who killed Sankara in Burkina Faso? Is it Compaore? I might be mistaken. Many of them were backed by foreign powers that were keen to have governments that were friendly to them in Africa. But this generation, like literally none of the coups that have happened recently have had any genuine grievances that you can speak of. And all of them have made things worse, at least the ones that have had time to try and prove themselves. They've made things worse than they were before in all of those countries. Mali, these guys took over the country because they're complaining of security. They've had 2 years, 2.5 years. Jihadists are running most of the country, and they've committed more atrocities in their process of trying to defeat these jihadists than they were doing with the French, who I don't like giving credit because I think the French have been the most disastrous of the Western powers in Africa. They are not doing themselves any favors, which means it complicates our opinion on this coups. Burkina Faso, Burkina Faso the same. Like these guys took over the government. Now they're running less than 40% of the country because jihadists have taken over everything. And then I hear that young boy speak. The guy who leads Burkina Faso now is called Ibrahim Traore. He's 35, I think. That nigga's a bitch, man. That guy has no content. Like you did you see him? He went to this Russia-Africa summit, and he was talking of nuclear power for Burkina Faso. Like this is the poorest country in Africa right now. They don't control their territory. You're going to put a nuclear power plant in an area that can be overtaken by jihadists in 2 days. And then now they're trying to change school uniforms. Like they want to Africanize their school uniforms. Mind you, like 60 or 70% of school-going children are not in school right now because they can't access their schools. They're internally displaced. They have the worst IDP crisis in the world right now. This nigga is talking about nuclear power plants and selling bananas to Russia. Like, what the fuck, man? And then you just see the lack of self-awareness of this guy. Now, I'm not balking at youth. I'm not saying that being young doesn't mean you can't run a country. I mean, all the American revolutionaries were pretty young. George Washington, at the time of the Declaration of Independence, I think he was the oldest guy of that group. Now, if you don't count Benjamin Franklin and the grandfathers. But a guy like Thomas Jefferson, when he was writing the Declaration of Independence, was 35. George Washington was 44. They were boys. But there were boys who had content. They had formation. They had intellectual formation, moral formation. There were people who stood up. And when a coup was presented to George Washington, he did not do it. He was like, even though all his soldiers supported it and they wanted to install him, like, nah, we can't start our republic with a coup, Yeah. So I think a lot of this is just selfishness and stupidity on the part of these guys. Niger, these guys had zero grievances. Their government had the best control of any of those countries there that were threatened by jihadists. I mean, that fellow was having barazas with the jihadists and agreeing with them, making deals so that they drop their weapons and they get integrated into society. What's not to love? Now they've done their coup. If they keep the coup, you give them 6 months. Most of that country will be overtaken by jihadists again. They make complicated situations even worse, and they're not doing any of us any favors. I fucking hate military guys who think they can run countries. They belong in their barracks, and they should take their orders from civilians.
That much I agree with wholeheartedly. And I feel like maybe that's part of, with everything you said, I suppose that's part of the problem with all these, the coups and like the military takeovers. They do not have the expertise or the know-how to run a country. You don't run a country the same way you run your barracks or an army or whatever. So obviously you need people who know their shit. You need ministers, you need all these different individuals in all these different positions.
Especially politicians. You need politicians
Especially
for all we hate
as
them, but you need them.
yeah. We need those fuckers. But also like how you mentioned like some of these countries and how the jihadists have been taking over. I feel like that definitely has to do part of it at least, what's been feeding into that is, let's say, the withdrawal of Western backed forces or like the withdrawal of Western resources, because at the end of the day, you do need you need the personnel and expertise. And I think the withdrawal of that definitely leaves a gap. I feel like, and I feel like it's twofold. It's one, they withdraw these resources and this personnel, knowing damn well we're leaving a gap. These other individuals are going to take advantage of that shit. So already, what is a fucked up situation is going to get even more fucked up. Whereas, truthfully, even though they're the ones that they're saying we don't want you motherfuckers here, in that instance, as leaders of the free world or whatever the Western motherfuckers want to call themselves or parade themselves as, that's when you should step in and be like, all right, cool, we may not necessarily agree with what you're doing, but in the interest of humanity, here are the necessary resources your people will need to aid this transition as guys figure shit out. But because it's a me against you kind of thing, or everybody's working for their own interests, that does not happen. And I know it's a lot more nuanced than that, and it's not as straightforward as that. And I think that's it, like all these nuances and all like the small things, the attention to detail is where everything is getting fucked. Like it's fair enough to say, cool, we're expelling the French. We don't want no Western, we don't want the West here. We want to self-govern ourselves. We want to be fully African and fully independent at this point, fine. But you need to look at the nooks and crannies, the small things that actually make the difference, the bolts that get this shit to work. And that's where all these guys are fucking up bigly. That's where they'll fucking
I thought it was our generation that would stand for the rule of law and democracy, at least the spirit of democracy in constructing our societies. But I'm getting disillusioned. And I'm thankful, I'm very thankful that there's a big chunk of Africa where this is not happening, even though people often call for it. I mean, like every time our boy Raila loses the election, you have people calling for the army to overthrow the government, or calling for secession. We want our own country and all that, but that's all in the spirit of politics. I hope nobody takes that shit seriously, because we don't want to live in a country run by the army. Because to the army, the army, those guys, their tools are weapons. And so for them, every problem is a target to be shot at. You can't go to the streets to protest. You can't speak your mind freely against these guys because they have fucking bullets and they have no civilian on top of them as their commander-in-chief. They take orders from soldiers. These guys are used to a regimented system. They give orders, people do what they say. Civilians, we're not used to that shit, man. I want to go to Java at 10 p.m. I want to go to Java at 10 p.m. Why do you want to go to bloody curfew? And it's better if that curfew is imposed by a civilian whom I can criticize and vote out the next election, than if it's by some self-appointed military guy whose qualification was. And actually, many of the guys who perform these coups, you find it's like not even a uniformed officer. It's rank and file or lower rank of officers, like the captains and company who. Those niggas know shit. I was going to say that their qualification is that they had a perfect dental formula and they were checked. I don't want to speak against the army. But, they went and ran around bare-chested and they were picked. Now you want to run a country.
No, but you're right about that. And I think that, and that like why it ties into, they can't run a country because this is not what they studied for. They didn't train for this. You trained to be a soldier, not to be a leader of a fucking free country or whatever.
Yeah. So, if you want to run a country, resign from the military, like leave the military and run for election. Exactly. Come sell your Just advice to all the armies of Africa. I'm not behind you if you're overthrowing a country. I don't give a fuck how corrupt your government is. You stay in your barracks.
But there's also
solve that problem.
You see, Matthew, for me, I get. And I may agree with those points, but as you say, this thing is also more nuanced because it's also bringing to light like a lot of questions about what the systems we have that we call democracy, whether they are in fact democratic at all. Because you see, when you look at what do you call it? For instance, elections. elections are supposedly to be communicating the will of the people, but you cannot tell me for seriousness sake that the people of Gabon, for instance, have made it their will that the Bongos should have ruled that country for 50 odd years. And similarly, even here, you don't have. Sorry to say, it's not a communication of the will of the people. There's a lot of subversion, which also the West still uses to manipulate and impose their will on countries like ours. I mean, if some of the pronouncements that do not want to come out as maybe pro opposition, but they do raise some points. Like you'd never hear the Russian ambassador make any claims about the US elections or for whatever its pros and cons were. You'd shut the fuck up. So it really shows you the kind of the chinks in the armor. Yes, I prefer the democracy any day compared to the coup. But we also have to have conversations now. This thing that you've called democracy, is it really democracy or it's some sham horse that you're being fed with and it's eating us alive, So I think there are still more questions than answers. We need to look at the ways you're going to reform that system.
I agree with that. And even when we talk about democracy, still tying back to what Matt said, and about like people our age, young people like us being disillusioned. And that's where we are at this point. Fine, we know, think about like the last election for Kenya, like 2020, literally last year, a year ago at this point. I remember genuinely asking a lot of my friends, and these are all like well-educated people who are they're they're well-educated. They know voting is what makes, you go exercise your right to vote, you make a change, you speak your mind, etc. But like speaking to all these guys, 9 out of 10 people I would talk to, no one bothered to vote. Guys didn't even register. And it's because we're at that point, guys are just at that point, like even if I vote, what difference is this shit genuinely going to make? Fine, the new guy is going to come in, but what difference is it going to make? Which is why some people, when I talk to now, are sort of in support of all these coups, because I feel like people feel like we've been backed into a corner where there's no real avenues or ways to change the particular systems we're in. So when people see, like again, our generation, when people are seeing coups happening for the first time in their lives, it's new, it's different, and you're like, and I can kind of, in a way, sort of empathize with the individuals who are the ones who are carrying out the coups and that sort of thing. So I feel like that's also where we are at. That point is that's the point where we're at, not just as society, but specifically as Africans. And as Africans at our particular age and at this particular point in our lives.
Yeah, that is true. That is absolutely true. And I do not deny it. And absolutely, I understand to some extent why all of a sudden coups seem so sexy and all. But if you've noticed, all the coups don't make anything better. It's a bargain that is like it's a false paradox, Like the people who don't vote usually, they are causing the same problem. Because if you vote overwhelmingly, then it's much harder for people to steal the vote. So it goes both ways. I am one person who will always vote, even though I know a lot of the times my votes will be stolen. But that is one thing you can do. So do it, and then you can say, at least I did my fucking part, Like, I was there when I was needed. And then I went back to my house, and I shut the fuck up, and I moved on, But regardless of all this, what we know is coups don't make things better. In very few places have they made things better. Very few places. And again, coups require people to be perfect. And I'm not even saying democracy is the highest value. Democracy is not the highest value. You cannot run a society purely based on democracy. I mean, that's why you have almost every country that has democratic in its name is actually a totalitarian system. In Korea, you have the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and then you have the Republic of Korea, and only the Republic is free. So precisely because Republican systems of government constrain democracy. They are not democratic per se, but they allow people to participate in the system, but in a managed manner with checks and balances. Now, there's nothing democratic about our judiciary. Nothing. The president appoints all those buggers, we don't get a say in it. Maybe it have to some level extent, there's some public participation, but we don't. And those niggas have the power to choose who becomes president if an election petition goes there. They have the power to send you to jail for the rest of your life. They have the power to send you to the gallows. I believe we've not sent anybody to the gallows technically for a while, but they have that power and we don't elect them. Still, there's some validity because at least we elect the people who appoint. So it's not a direct democracy, but we participate. We get to participate to a certain extent. And almost universally, all those places where people at least get a say are better. I mean, that's one of the things that makes this country good. Even though our elections are shady and all, we're doing pretty well. And that's a lot coming from a Luo who didn't vote for the current government. But I think we're doing pretty well. At least we don't have... Anyway, let me not go down that path. Tell me, how do you treat of all this content in music? How because I know. Anyway, no, you tell me.
Yeah, I feel like with the band, for example, Crystal Axis, I think our journey has been really fucking interesting. One, starting off as children. Two, being like Black Africans in a space that is largely white male dominated. I feel like the latter was sort of like the bigger thing. So we found ourselves
not just Black, but Black Africans.
Specifically Black fucking Africans.
Sure.
So I don't know. Our music has always been sort of like politically charged, like since the get-go. I remember when we put out the State of Unease EP, which came out in 2012, but I think I'd been writing this since I was like 14, 15, and then didn't get recorded until I was 18 or thereabouts. So the entire premise of the EP was basically my account of how I felt during the post-election period. So it was basically a concept EP which talked about the elections, post-election violence. And I remember like in the lead up to the 2007 elections, talking to family, relatives, or like anyone who was in a position to vote. I'm like, so what are you going to vote for? And we talk about, I'm going to vote for this person. And I'm like, why? Because they're like, oh man, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. So I found that to be a really interesting approach and a really interesting attitude for adults who are in that position to have. Because you're a kid at that point, you're like, but y'all are meant to be adults. Y'all are grown motherfuckers. You're meant to be making conscious decisions that shape our lives and shape the fucking country. Now you're telling me you're in this position and you're just going to vote for the person because better, he's fucked up in a good way. We don't know about the other kind of fucked up, but we know he's fucked up. But so let's stick to his shit.
Yeah.
So initially, so that was like the premise of the entire EP. So, and then over time, we sort of just stuck sort of within that space and within those themes. So when I came back in 2017, we did Leopold, which talked about colonialism, African history, that sort of thing. We wrote specifically about Belgium, Congo, and King Leopold's reign when he was in charge of the Congo, basically. And the reason we wrote about that is because, one, we felt like there's not enough stories about African history. Even up until today, I'll have people come up to me like, yo, you playing Crystal Axis? Like, yeah, I just heard Leopold. I've been listening to this song for like the last couple of years, but I didn't know you guys were actually writing about King Leopold of Belgium. I didn't even know this shit happened. So I went back and read about it. So it's the fact that, for example, what happened in Belgium, Congo was honestly like basically the first, the biggest case of genocide in human history. However, it's not talked about, taught to us the way, for example, Nazi Germany is taught about us. We know about Mussolini, we know about Stalin, we know about Hitler, we know about all these guys. Why the fuck did we know about King Leopold? This shit happened right here on this continent, on this soil.
I know there are people who will say that this is anti-Semitic, but I am not an anti-Semite. But the reason we know about the Holocaust is that Hitler killed Jews.
Yeah.
He didn't kill Africans. Leopold killed 15 million Africans.
Then that's the estimate still.
That's the estimate. And like millions more were maimed.
Mm-hmm.
And all that in a country he called the Congo Free State. It was
Exactly.
Because it wasn't Belgian Congo at the time, it was his personal property. Like one European king has the largest territory in Africa, largest contiguous territory in Africa, as his personal property, and all the European countries were in on it.
Yeah, they said, by the way, it's okay, you do your thing, us, we have ours.
Yeah.
And they left it at that.
In fact, many people don't know that it was because of Leopold that the Berlin Conference was held.
Exactly, yeah.
Because he wanted a piece. He wanted a piece of this.
Yeah, he wanted the best piece. So he gave off.
So he forced these guys to come together.
Played some dice with them, but he ended up with the juiciest parts.
He ended up with the sirloin.
You do what you want, but me, I just want this. You guys take the rest.
Ridiculous.
So yeah. So it's fucking exactly. So it's ironic that people don't know shit like this. So I remember seeing, like, when I first read about King Leopold and what happened in Congo Free State, I was just utterly, I couldn't speak. Like, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. I literally went through every range of emotion. One, shame, because why the fuck did I know this? Secondly, anger, because how the fuck did this happen and we're not being taught about this and this is not being spoken about? Thirdly, it was like, cool, bro. Now we need to do some shit. I could sit here and I could stew with my feelings, or we could talk about it. And like me, the way I know how to express myself and how I know to put messages across is through music, through storytelling, through music. For me, that's my avenue. That's where I excel. So that's exactly what we did. We just put everything down on pen and paper. We hit the studio and we wrote about Leopold. Like, we were not expecting or trying to reach for a public reaction, but it was really encouraging and awesome to see how people reacted to the song, because one, it was informative and educative. They didn't know about it. They didn't know about, King Leopold, this aspect of African history. And then as we went along more and more, we realized this is something that's important and something that needs to be spoken about. We need to be telling African stories from an African perspective, not from the textbooks that we were given when we were in school, because that does not cover even a fraction of the story. Even if you were to look internally within Kenya itself, we were told, I remember growing up, we were told, Jomo Kenyatta, that motherfucker fought for Kenya's freedom. Where we are, Kenyatta.
Yeah. And
then Kidogo, you start to read, you're like, yo, hold the fuck up. Wait, what? Yo,
that was like Kenya's greatest opportunist.
Yeah, Kenya's greatest freedom fighter. Kenya's greatest opportunist.
Kenya's greatest opportunist, man. That guy was something.
Some motherfucker took capitalism and ran with it to another. But so yeah, in that vein of form, like even like more like within the local context, like after we did Leopold, we did Nyayo House, because again, people don't know about Nyayo House, which again blows my fucking mind. Like, even after we put the song out, someone was like, dude, why are you guys writing about the passport building? I'm like, fam, I know it's a passport building now, but do you know the history of it? Again, people have no idea about the history of no clubs. No one has any.
They pass through there all that time, and they have no idea there's a basement there. They have no idea that some guys used to take high jumps from the top.
Dude.
And a strong urging from.
They slipped and fell.
Yeah, that was strong inducement for them to slip and fall. And that was not long ago. Like, that was the other day. It was like a few days before most of us were born. It wasn't that
exactly.
long ago.
And for me, that's the thing that blows my mind. Like, it just happened the other day. It's still fresh. It's not gone. It's not changed. Nothing has been. The victims have not been sorted out. The history is not being acknowledged. This is just being swept under the rug. And for me, like, it was a mindfuck, because I have like friends whose parents were literally put in Nyayo House, who were tortured in Nyayo House. I worked for people who are in Nyayo House. I've spoken to people like who've been through the entire experience, and it's such a mindfuck. Like, these people are still alive. This shit happened, but it's not being acknowledged. It's we don't know about it. It's not being taught in schools. Your parents are not talking about it. So we were like, bruv, this is wrong. Like, at the very least, we can't just sweep this under the rug and just let it go, because one, there's no accountability, which I guess is the main thing, like lack of accountability. Two, people need to know about these things. It doesn't matter that it happened 20, 30 years ago. It doesn't matter that quote unquote, it's over now. But these things happened, and if we don't talk about them, we're going to end up losing it altogether, and we're going to have an entire.
And I think that's the mistake that many of the guys who are advocating for coups right now, that's the mistake they're making. Like they are historically naive. I mean, the other day I was speaking with a Congolese fellow, and he was complaining about his country, and at some point he even wished, that the country was still, that Mobutu was still around. It was like, if Mobutu was still around, none of this would have. I was like, nigga, like, just did you hear what you just said?
Yeah, and that's the other thing, like exactly what you said. We're also in this period where people romanticize the past, but because you didn't, in that era. Like I remember last week, literally, someone I was talking to was like, "Man, things were still better when Moy was around." I'm like, "Bro, what the fuck?"
Bro, like, just hold up, nigga. Like, hold up. What did you just say?
Yeah, and it's not just Moi. Sometimes there's been a lot of this propaganda going on, or we had it good during the Kibaki era. I mean, if you can't remember the extrajudicial killings with the Michuki, it was another like reign of terror. As much as it wasn't as bad, but it's the same machine that is eating up people, and people are almost like, we had it better. Oh, no, we did not. Yeah, I mean, it was probably
like the past is just for a lesson. It's like you see, we humans are like, we are wired to be nostalgic for the past. We look at it with this rose-tinted glasses. Yeah, like there's no time like the past. All of us want to go back to our childhood when we were, we were not responsible for anything. But wait, did we lose? Oh, I'm the one who dropped that. Oh, the power went out. Sorry, guys.
Oh, good, man. No worries.
The power went out here and killed the Wi-Fi. And now that's one part I don't appreciate about this government. We've had way more blackouts.
Yeah, honestly, what's been going on with all these KPLC blackouts?
I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what's going on.
Like it's not making sense understanding it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. You check the management board of KPLC and the executive board as well, and you'll see the problem.
But have you noticed, it's not just the blackouts, but I mean, power has become 4 times more expensive than what it was last year. It means crazy. Like the amount I would spend for maybe close to an entire month is what I spend in like 4 or so days.
Yeah.
Wow. And there isn't really like an explanation that you would say, even if it was a question of subsidy, like was the power being subsidized to like 80%? Like it makes absolutely
no, they've not
sense.
been subsidizing power. Our power is reasonably expensive, even by global standards. It's not. That's a joke.
No, it really is.
What was subsidized was the rural electrification, the extension of the grid. That was subsidized but it was a USAID thing. It wasn't, and the World Bank.
I mean, regardless of that, the way you're saying, there's no explanation, there's no breakdown. Why have this shit pandered the way it has?
I think.
Why is it not? Yeah, there's no explanation, there's no breakdown about it. There's no accountability.
There's a lot more incompetence in the system now than there has been. Yeah, I think that is the main problem, because maintaining the grid is if you have competent engineers, it's not a difficult thing.
It's a straightforward thing. 1 + 1 = 2. You get the job. But
now, of course, it's a very intricate machine. It's like one machine that stretches across the whole country. That is true, but we have the engineers. We are churning out electrical engineers from all these universities, and we have old ones as well.
This is why we have systems, and this is why we have formulas. These things are meant to work, regardless of who he's sitting in the government, who's the incumbent regime and all that. Shit is still meant to work. Shit is still meant to continue.
Yeah.
But it's not. And I guess that's what we can give the Kenyan government props for. Kudos, man. Consistency in being trash.
Yeah.
Not only because of that, just being
that one, yeah. You can take a loan on it.
It's a beautiful thing that we live in a country where we can freely say that.
Exactly.
That also matters. All those guys who are nostalgic for Moi days, they should know that if we had said that, we would expect a pickup to, Peugeot to wait for us at the gate tomorrow, you know?
You would be at work in the morning tomorrow.
Yeah.
You would not be home for dinner tonight.
Yeah. And you'd have very strong urging, very strong suggestion to slip and fall off the top of Nyayo House. If you can't take a boat across Lake Victoria and go into exile it.
You're going to fly, my dude. Not by choice, but just fly.
Yeah, you gotta go. Yeah, there are people who are not really happy to hear what you say. You don't keep your opinions to yourself. There's a story I've heard of a professor who had been given some government post. You know, he was a well-known government critic. So, but I don't know how Moan decided to give him a job. So the guys who went to inform him of this good news went in a police car. You know? So this nigga, man, he was waking up in the morning and seeing a police car in his compound. Like, oh shit, the day has arrived. So the guy,
he knew today was the day.
Yeah, his goose was cooked. So he ran out the back door, you know, and made for his farm. And this guy, of course, also wanted to give him the news. So they chased him. Of course, they eventually got him and pinned him to the ground. And of course, he was asking for mercy, man. Guys, I'm sorry. No, Professor, no. There's nothing wrong. You've just been made the head of such and such a parastatal. Oh, shit. Okay.
That is so fucking funny. It's funny and not funny at the same time. Because see, that reaction is like a trauma from the Nyayo regime. So again, you come to your compound, you know what one. We've seen this script. We've seen how it plays out.
Anyway, I think we should wind this thing.
This is a conversation that could go on the whole afternoon for days. Even this is
please act on that temptation to come to the village, man.
Honestly,
I made the jump. I made the jump, and it worked out. Yeah. I was working in Nairobi, and then 3 years ago I got mad. People still think I'm mad. Assistants who don't know me as well, and I went to. I built my house in the village and I lived in it. Now I'm back in Kisumu because I need to be here for some reason.
Yes.
I have my own house that I live in and it works out perfectly. Don't pay nobody no rent. I'll boot KPLC at some point. Yeah.
Madness is the solution at times. You just need to say, fuck this shit, I'm gonna pack up my balls and I'm gonna fuck up. And that's but big ups to you for doing that.
It works. It works. Yeah. Absolutely works. I think my accent is reverting to the pure Luo one. I don't begrudge it that much. In fact, many Kenyan ladies find it very romantic the way Luo men speak. So maybe it will work for me. Anyway, Djae, man, it's been a pleasure, bro.
This has been absolutely delightful. Thank you guys so much for having me. I've had so much fun. Please bring me back in. Put me back in.
We will get you back in, as many times as possible. We'll chew your ears off and we'll let you chew ours as well.
Fantastic. It's come at a really great moment because I was actually with the band yesterday and we're actually now in the midst of actually putting together our own little podcast.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'd definitely love to have you guys on there to have this sort of conversations because this has been tremendous, and I feel like this is exactly what we need. I want to do that stupid shit where you sit down, you react to Twitter videos or fucking TikToks and all that. These are the right conversations. This is what the fuck a podcast is meant to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I will. I'm still working on the schedule and everything, but I'll share the same and as well as the topics, and then whatever is convenient for you guys, we could have you on like a couple of episodes.
Absolutely. Yeah, with pleasure.
Thank you so
with
much.
Utmost pleasure. All right, man. I suppose we end it. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll see you another time.
Definitely. And
All
let
right.
me know. Let me know like once this is up and everything, so I can also share it around and whatnot.
Absolutely. Sure thing.
Sawa.
All right.
Awesome, man. Good seeing you.
Have a good afternoon.
Yeah,
Sure.
we'll have a separate conversation. We need to catch up as well. It's been a minute.
No problem.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.